Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What is awesome health? It's actually an acronym that stands for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mental beliefs and attitudes, and education. These are the pillars of peak health, and my team and I have created a free 12-week course that you can use to transform. Each day, you'll get a written and video lesson delivered to your inbox. Everything is covered from the foundations of digestion to advanced alternative therapies few people know about. And again, it's 100% free. Just go to bioptimizers.com. That's bioptimizers.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we've got a very special guest who's going to be talking about a bunch of things. He's made some recent changes in his business model. His name is Joe Hoye, and he's the owner of Hoye Fit. And of course, he's helped a lot of women in midlife beyond. And now he's switching gears to kind of get ahead of the curve and deal with people who are losing body control early in life, 20, 30-year-olds and that sort of stuff. Of course, Joe has a background as a surgery technologist who focused on OBGYNs, and he gained a deep understanding of women's health as well as diet stuff. And I think we got a common element here is, what happens when you've engaged in a diet, a strategy that maybe worked or didn't work, but the downstream problems of that diet means that you created some problems. So for those who haven't heard the story before, way back in 2003, I was competing at the Mr. Universe contest. I'm doing it on a plant-based diet. I'm applying a meat-eating mentality to it, and because no one had done that before. And I got great results, won a national championships, went to the Mr. Universe contest. And then afterwards, gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks, which led me to Dr. O'Brien to learn the elements of digestion and how that can get screwed up from a high cortisol and a diet that's not suited for your genetics. No one was talking about enzymes and probiotics and things like that. That prompted us to actually start Bioptimizers 20 years ago as an information company in the bodybuilding market. Then we moved into the health optimization market as we got older. And now here, 20 years later, we're here today with Joe to talk about his own story as someone who helps people get in the best shape they possibly can. So maybe you can kind of update us on some recent changes that's happened with you, Joe, because our listeners would love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Wade, thank you so much, number one. Number two, I'm actually interested in what you mean by you entered with a plant-based diet, but a meat eater's mentality. So eventually, just out of curiosity, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. Here's what happens when you get deep inside of any dietary philosophy. What happens is that we make a set of assumptions that appear to be true under certain conditions. Those assumptions are built into your dietary model. And for the low information or non-expert in that area, and if you're out there working a job, working a life, raising a family, trying to get to that next level of competency in your life, whatever it happens to be, you're essentially relying on secondhand information. So in a lot of times in podcasts, you'll get on the paleo guy or the plant-based person or the raw vegan or the carnivore. And I'm old enough now that I've watched these cycles rise and fall with different names, different hooks, and a different supplement or product to support that on the back end. And what happens, we talk about this in the book behind me is The Ultimate Nutrition Bible, which was probably the most unbiased nutrition book ever written because we simply identified how to be successful on a wide range of diets.
Mm-hmm.
So when it came to me on plant-based, what happened is in 2001, I got into spirituality, Eastern philosophy, and one of the suggestions was to go to a plant-based diet to improve your meditation. And there was a bunch of scientifically sound critical thinking principles of why that might be the case, but I believe in investigating. So I did it.
Sure.
Now, keep in mind, before that, I had been successful as a bodybuilder, but I got out of the industry, particularly because it became a race to the bottom, in that people were just using, it wasn't just about your genetics and your discipline and your training regimen. It became, can you tolerate the sheer amount of drugs that's required in order to be competitive at the highest levels of the nation? And that didn't interest me. I knew I didn't have the genetics to be a Ronnie Coleman. That's not going to happen no matter what I did.
Right.
So I left, advanced my personal training career. I ran a nutrition store, but I love the process of bodybuilding. I love the art of it. And although I was very successful using meat, it was a whole new ball game on the plant-based. And everybody was, well, actually exclusively vegetarian diet. We use plant-based, but whatever. The idea is how do I go about it? And the biggest determining factor on how you're going to sustain a diet is satiety. Okay, if you are not in a starvation, you can maintain a starvation type mentality for as long as your discipline and focus runs out.
Correct.
In that case, I was literally dieting for 11 months because I had to win my local championships, my national championships, and then go to the world championships. Now that's way longer than a normal dietary cycle. The other thing is, as I was trying to use the principles well established in the bodybuilding and fitness era about how to get in shape with a plant-based diet. And it was a lot harder simply because you just don't have the same amount of amino acids to pull from. And all the research, by the way, says, hey, it doesn't matter if the source is from animals or plants or whatever. There is a total amino acid pool that is required in order to maintain muscle mass and to be able to do so in a calorie restricted diet, because you got to restrict your calories relative to your exercise output.
Correct.
So as I did that, the thing was, on a plant-based diet, here's the caveat that I learned years later. I came back 4 years later after that failure and did a raw food diet. So I was eating 250 grams of protein on a plant-based diet or a meat eating diet. 4 years later, I came back and ate 85 grams of protein and was more successful than I was before.
Wow.
But the key element of that was, number one, I'd optimize my digestive system, which I had screwed up 4 years before. Sure. Second, my conversion of the protein I was eating into the amino acids I need was a critical factor. And I was actually running an experiment to see, if you eat 200 grams of protein, how much of that is actually amino acids? And no one could actually definitively answer that question. So I just ran experiments and started tapering down. Now that I'm in my 50s, I went back to the universe a couple of years ago, the Natural Olympia as a pro, won a pro card at the Ironman and all that sort of stuff. And then I came back. Now I needed about 130 to 150 grams. It's a lot easier nowadays because there's plant-based proteins and all this sort of
right.
stuff. With an optimized digestion. So that is just the degenerative ability of protein synthesis, because it's 20 years later. I'm an older guy. So the system that I'm putting that into is different. So when you look at all these dietary strategies, and we're going to tie this back to you, your age, the state of your digestion, what is your genetic influence? Some people do really well. Like I do really well on carbohydrates. Matt, my business partner, does really well on, a more ketogenic diet.
Mm-hmm.
The element that I included in order to maintain satiety was fiber. So I used fiber as my satiety agents, where traditional bodybuilders use protein. Right. And that was essentially the differentiation that I had to figure out. So all that to say that you could do it on a plant-based diet. You could do it on a carnivore diet. You could do it on a keto diet. You could do it if it fits your macros diet. You can even do it on a raw food diet. And I'm a testament that between myself and Matt, we've actually been successful on all of those diets. So we wanted to say that in life, there's no solutions. There's only trade-offs. And why we bring guys like you, Joe, onto the show is to demonstrate to people there are people who have developed expertise within a range to deal with the unique challenges that you think are unique to me, the listener. I don't know why my friend Rick's diet, it doesn't work for me. I don't know why this used to work for me and now I'm gaining weight like crazy. I used to exercise 6 times a week and now I'm blown out after 4. Like, well, why did that happen? There's a series of things that are not covered in the general dietary strategy that are key elements for you to identify and correct in your lifestyle. You can't supplement your way out of a bad diet, and you cannot diet your way, or you can't exercise your way out of a poor diet either. So where's that happy balance to achieve all your goals? Well, you need expertise like Joe. So that's why we bring fellows like you onto the show to kind of unload to our viewers who might be struggling what they need to do next.
Yeah, man, I love this. And I might really make the listener's day, or I might really let them down here, because a lot of what I'm about is a lot of what you're about from the sounds of this. The book that you mentioned that's sitting right behind you seems like an older iteration of what I wrote called the Diet Detox. And the whole goal of that is to show you guys it's not a diet that you're looking for that's going to accomplish your goals. It's finding out what your body needs. And I don't really care how you get to what your body needs as long as you get there. You could do keto, you could do carnivore, you could do vegan, do whatever. Your body just needs this certain amount of calories in this macronutrient profile. And if you hit that, you're going to succeed.
Yeah, 100%. So in your practice, what has kind of led you to that, that observation that allows you to say, okay, I've examined all of these different things and I see patterns of success and I see patterns of failure. What's led you to that conclusion?
Just evolution of my own coaching, knowledge, experience, and testing on myself, and ultimately by accident testing on others. When I first started coaching 7 years ago, I was all about just calories. And then through just a little bit of education, I dove into carb cycling, and I was getting the same results as I was with just calories and protein. And then we went to low carb, and then we went to high carb. And I noticed over time, I'm getting the same results for the same type of people. It's just, what are they following to get there? And so now I've evolved to where it's like, hey, if you like my carb cycling, I would love to show you how to do that and be successful. If you didn't like it, I would love to show you how to not do it and still be successful. And for me, it's just been evolution. That's what my entire coaching career has been.
So what are the kind of challenges that people are having when they show up on your doorstep? Usually when a person goes to seek out an expert, there's some aspect though that they don't understand, they're confused, or they've surrendered on the levels like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm uncertain about how to go about this. Something has happened in my life that has changed my normal state. What's happening with your clients?
Yeah, God. Well, up until 5 days ago, I could answer that really well. And now I'm in uncharted territory and I can't answer that so well. And it's going to be back to research. But before that, I was known as the man for fat loss and menopause. The reason for that is because, like you said in my intro, I worked in surgery for 4 years, working full-time in emergency surgery in OBGYN, directly next to surgeons, and asking what these women could have done proactively to prevent being in surgery. So I learned a lot from that.
Let's talk about that for just a brief second, because I think that's really interesting. I think one of the most amazing things that's happened over the last 50 or 60 years, we look at most of the gains in longevity since the 1960s is not the development of new drugs, but I would say it is the efficiency and effectiveness of surgeries and less complications from them, as well as early detection of conditions before. And now we're on the backside of that, where the dependency on drugs is actually causing a drop in life expectancy. So we have people often mistake doctors and surgeons as the same camp, but they're pretty divisive about how you go attacking a problem or a condition. But what were the kind of things that surgeons were saying that could have prevented some of the needs for surgery?
Yeah, really, if we want to just boil this all down to one thing, it was just lifestyle.
Mm.
You know, we could pick apart all of this, but it comes down to lifestyle and how people were living, treating their body, feeding their body, moving their body, and how consistently they were doing it is really what it came down to. I mean, granted, there are certainly cases where somebody can do everything right and nothing goes right. And you know what? Sometimes that's just out of our control. But I'm a big fan of doing everything in our control and praying for the best.
Yeah, and we've seen cases with people who were chronically obese, from childhood and going into like the super obese people, like 400 pounders, 300 pounders, 500 pounders, and getting down to a normal weight under the most, I can't even, I can't even contemplate the level of a mountain that someone at that level's achieving. And then we also hear like the Biggest Loser story that people lose all this weight, and then that what they did to lose the weight sets them up to gain it all back again.
Yeah, correct. Which is what I'm very against. Because as I'm sure you've talked about just from hearing what you're saying, diets really aren't the best idea because ultimately what people want is not the number on a scale. People want a certain reflection in the mirror, a certain look and feel in their body. And the number on the scale can mean a whole lot of different things. You know, I've been 195 pounds in two different ways. I've been fat and I've been how I am now. And fairly muscular, fairly lean. I feel really good now, but I didn't feel good before. And it's the same thing I see with the ladies that we work with, right? They'll diet down to their goal weight of 140, but when they're getting down there, they're losing body fat and they're losing muscle. The diet doesn't teach them how to maintain. And once they get to 140, they stop the diet. They go right back up to the 180 pounds they were before, but now they're a softer version of that. They've lost their muscle and they gained all the weight back in fat. So they weigh the same, but they look different. They have a slower metabolism. And now losing the weight this next time is even harder. And if they've done that 5, 10, or 15 times, they're living in a nightmare. A metabolic nightmare is what I call it.
Yeah, that's one of the key elements for people to understand is metabolism. In your words, how would you define or a healthy metabolism and versus say maybe an unhealthy metabolism?
I mean, gosh, one that works for you rather than against you, right? You have enough muscle on your body, which we know is the thing that burns the most amount of calories. And because you have that muscle, you have a high metabolism, meaning you have lots of food freedoms, meaning your TDEE, or actually even your BMR, is high. Your basal metabolic rate, how many calories you burn at rest versus somebody, go ahead.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing that's misunderstood a lot of people because they get on the stair climber, hang on to the rails, crank out an hour of quote unquote cardio and say, "Oh, I burned 600 calories today." It's like, no, you didn't. A lot of those numbers are kind of finessed. Number two, 2 hours later, your heart rate is back down to normal and you're not burning any calories. However, if you spent that same hour 3 times a week, maybe you're doing that 6 times a week and say, I burned an extra 3,600 calories this week, I should be losing a pound a week. The other way, you went to the gym 3 times a week for an hour, you did weights, you add over the course of, 10 months, you added 5 or 10 pounds of muscle, which is burning all this extra calories. So you're working less, but the concentrated effort of what you're doing has an improvement in your metabolism. So that means a metabolism that's working for you, to use your own words. So what are the strategies that you employ for people who have gone through that cycle of dieting, or are you saying, no, let's avoid that from the get-go, or is it a kind of a combination of the two?
Well, I mean, that's the big switch here, right? So I was only working with women in their 40s and older. And generally, they didn't just gain the weight in their 40s. They had it in their 20s or their 30s. And so because of that, they've been dieting on and off since then. And so I've been dealing with a reactive problem. I am reacting and they are reacting to the fact that they've dieted 5 times and lost more and more muscle every single time. And so now I'm trying to be proactive, and I want to catch the younger version of them. I want to catch a generation after them. Say, hey, this is what I just spent 7 years dealing with. Is this what you want? The answer is going to be no. Okay, great. Then we should probably go this path. And so that path is kind of a 2-cycle phase that I created called foundations and reshaping. And I mean, if we want to really boil it down, we could call it a bulk and a cut. But I want people to build a solid foundation of muscle, of metabolism, of education and understanding of what their body truly needs. That way, when it's time to reshape, when they've earned the right to reshape their body, it's fast and it's simple, because not only are they doing the right things and they've learned how to do it in a way that fits in their life, but they've built such an adequate amount of muscle that the fat, I don't want to sound like the quick fix guy because I'm not, but the fat just drops off them because their body's working for them.
You know, it's funny. I remember 20 years ago when I was personal training in Vancouver, and I would get lots of high performing women that would want to start with me. They hadn't exercised, that hadn't done weight training before, didn't know what they're doing, that sort of stuff. And I would say to them, I said, okay, we're going to identify, I would figure out how long I anticipated. And I'd say, well, if we're going to take this off healthily, we want to lose a half pound to a pound of body fat a week. But I said, your first 3 months, your weight's going to go up. And they would just look at me like, are you crazy? And I'm like, yeah, I haven't done any resistance training. And in your first 12 weeks, you're going to get incredible results from even almost the worst plain exercise program. And I said, I'm going to work on some postural things, and I'm going to work on some muscle groups that would allow you for the shape that you're looking for. And sure enough, those first few weeks, they would start gaining weight right off the diet. And then I would start teaching them the habits. And then, a month in, they're a little bit heavier. 2 months in, they're starting to see a little bit of drop, but we're tracking their body fat levels, and we're showing them the difference in their lean body mass versus their fat mass. And then somewhere around, week 12, we'd start to see exactly what you're talking about. This I called it metabolic momentum, that they were eating. The diet was the same. The routine wasn't really changing that much, but all of a sudden their body fat, not just their weight, their body fat start to drop. And of course, muscle mass would usually, a lot of women are like, I'll work out, I'm going to get too big, but they just wouldn't. You're not going to get too big as a girl lifting weights. You're going to look more shapely, more toned, look a lot better. And it's the only way that you can actually change your natural shape is by adding muscle in the right places. And then you'd see that momentum. And then 6 months later, they'd be really happy. And then usually at a year's level, they had developed the lifestyle management components. And that is, how do you handle social occasions? How do you handle holidays? How do you handle vacations? What foods can you do a spike day on that work for you? What ones can you not do? How do you make adjustments when you're traveling, and all of those little nuances that throw people off, and you get a spiraling downcast of the effets, as we call it. Like, oh man, I blew my diet out. I'm just going to go all weekend long. We'll start again Monday. Because you're fighting these evolutionary tendencies. And what was interesting about that is, after my first year of coaching, there was just this momentum of girls that were coming to me, fitness competitors, everybody that was like, how come all your clients look better? What's going on inside of that? I'm like, well, because they're following a system of metabolism. They're not trying to lose weight. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm here to lose weight. And I'm like, yeah, losing weight is not the problem. Losing the right weight is the problem.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it really boils down to the simple saying of, if you give me 3 hours to chop a tree down, I'll spend the first 2.5 sharpening the axe and the last 30 minutes cutting the tree down. It's just make your body work for you, and everything goes so much easier.
So now that you're switching gears, you're addressing people in their 20s, 30s, females, males, both. How are you looking at that?
Anyone that's ready for change to do it what I think is the right way. Yeah. I mean, we're still going to help the women 40, 50, 60 and older, but I also just want to go downstream and really just be proactive.
Is that because so many women, once they get to that, the ingrained belief systems, lifestyle habits, and the compromisations become so complex, it's just be like, you're not just fighting the physiology, you're fighting the psychology.
You nailed it. I mean, we're undoing decades of mindset, self-talk, limiting beliefs. And that's not to say I'm not going to be doing that for the 20 and 30-year-olds. It's just not as ingrained in them.
Mm-hmm. What is ingrained in the 20 to 30-year-old group? What are they coming to you as with their problem set or challenges?
Man, ask me, let's redo this in 6 months and ask me then. I mean, I did this 5 days ago, and we don't have one of those clients yet. I'm just now putting the ball in motion, and I think it's going to take some time to build momentum. But I would say it's going to be fairly similar, right? Very similar to what you experienced. I think a lot of the women we are going to work with are going to say, look, I don't want to work out like you, Joe. I don't want to look like you. And so I'm going to have to tell them, just like you told them, look, you're not just going to wake up the next day and be jacked. It's going to take a lot of work. And even if it does, your body's not built like that. Your hormones aren't designed for that. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I always found that one funny. It's like, if you knew how hard it was to build this amount of muscle, you'd be very clear that you're not going to do it.
Yep, exactly.
What are some of the unique lifestyle factors today that you feel are influencing the obesity crisis or metabolic disease crisis that we're faced with?
Man, I think most people have a job like you or me where they sit at a desk behind a computer and they're sedentary all day long. I think it's easier than ever to get shitty food, right? I mean, God, we have Uber Eats, DoorDash, and you can just get it brought right to your house. It's easier than cooking. It's really not that expensive. The world is set up for simplicity and ease. And I think that making easy choices creates a harder life.
Yeah, life's going to be hard no matter what, one way or the other.
Yeah.
The human condition is fraught with peril. It's fatal. No one gets out alive. And so the Pollyanna mentality about lifestyle has to be taken away, and the value of hard work, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think it's going to ebb and flow. I think we're going to see what's happening. And a lot of people are going to make this shift like, all right, it's time to work hard again. And then life is going to get easier, both in health and in many things. But we're here to talk about health today.
What do you think from a technology standpoint is, because, we're suffering from I would say, the advantages of technological innovation. In other words, life has become so easy from a physical work point of view, and human body is designed to be physical, that it's making it so easy to screw up your metabolism, gain too much weight, get the ease of, you don't have to go hunting. You don't have to go out and tend a garden. You tend your iPhone from your couch watching Netflix and say, hey, here's 2,000 calories dropped on my doorstep. That is super addictive and tastes great and wonderful. And it's delivered. I don't have to make it. I don't have to get off the couch. I can still watch my TV show. Where prior to that, you had to work the farm all day, or you had to go out and hunt. So if you're a hunter-gatherer type, that's one camp, or you're an agricultural person on the other camp, either way, you were working your butt off in order to get the food. Like if you look at my parents' age, for example, I see pictures of when they were kids.
Yeah.
There's no obese people. There's none. There's virtually one obese person was considered an outlier, unusual, and it's usually their dad owned the general store and they were eating candy all day long. Everybody else was lean, fit. They didn't go to weight gyms, weren't popular back then. Nobody lifted weights, but you had to lift wood. You had to carry things. You had to, you played outside all day long. I used to play, I would walk to school, play after
Uphill
school.
both ways.
Yeah, I was literally the uphill both way. That's so funny. Play after school, come home for lunch, and then play till dark. And I'd ride my bike as fast as I could to go to the mile to go see my friends. I would we play capture the flag, or we playing baseball or football or soccer, and we'd be bumping each other and roughing them, climbing trees, doing whatever, and then we'd come home. Now when I go around the neighborhood, I don't see kids out playing. They're on Nintendos.
Yep.
Or whatever, Xboxes, I guess now. It's Nintendo's dating me.
You're dating yourself.
It
Yeah, but the thing is, just to add on to that, I mean, I think if we go even further back than your parents, the only obese people were the rich ones because they were
Yes.
the ones that could afford the luxuries that we now all have, right? Not really lifting a finger, not really doing much, living the lifestyle that the majority of us live today. And so those were the ones that got obese. But now that we all live it, many more of us are getting obese.
So what are some of the things that you've done to figure this whole puzzle out that eludes so many people?
And now for a Bioptimizer's fixed digestion tip, rapid cheat meal relief. Research shows that cheat meals can actually be an effective way to boost your metabolism. One key weight loss hormone, leptin, can be increased by up to 30% following a cheat meal. The challenge with the cheat meals is that all those extra calories and lower food quality can be hard to digest, which means you could be totally sidelined with a food coma after big cheat meals. The solution is to take strong digestive enzymes like masszymes, which will help rapidly digest and break down the extra food. 3 to 5 capsules before or right after your cheat meal can make a huge difference in how you feel following the cheat meal. If it's a cheat day with multiple large meals, you might want to go up to 10 capsules or higher to help you power through all that food. To save 10% on masszymes, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and enter the code CHEAT10 at checkout.
I just tried to uncomplicate it, right? I think as humans, that's one of our greatest downfalls is we take something simple and we seriously overcomplicate it for God knows what reason. When in reality, if you just eat foods that have ingredients you can pronounce and you move your body consistently and sleep, basically when the sun goes down and comes up, you're going to be okay, right? But for some reason, nobody can follow that. Blame it on the screens, blame it on Instagram, blame it on the food designed by scientists paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to make it addicting. We just can't follow it.
I want you to dive a little deeper into that. What would you intuit that to? Is it because I think you're nailing something on the head. We don't have an information issue. There's never been more information about fitness, and there's a large group of population. It's a smaller percentage than the general population, but they're living extraordinary. They're reversing aging. They look great. They're at the highest levels of performance, fitness, vitality on every single metric you can imagine. You see them all plastered all over the place on social media and stuff like that. Like, how come what's unique about those people and the people who can't seem to figure it out? Is it psychological? Is that holding it? Is it addictions that are socially acceptable? Is it chemicalizations? How would you ascribe those camps of the factors that are stealing people's health away from them?
That's a really good question. And you're probably probing for an answer that you're not going to get. I think some of this goes to a comfort and discomfort paradox, right?
Mm-hmm.
People live for immediate comfort and they'll sacrifice their long-term comfort because of it. Whereas I like to live with more foresight. And I understand that if I get my ass up at 5 a.m. when it's cold here in Vermont and I really don't want to, and I get my butt to the gym, I've already won the day. And that whole thing was uncomfortable. But now I don't really have to sweat it. And I know that if I do this 3-4 days a week for the rest of my life, my whole life's going to be a whole lot easier.
So there's a good point. Do you think, we're going back to essentially the two one marshmallow.
Yeah, I love this study.
The people that could delay instant gratification and look downstream of where my choices today are going to lead, then those people tend to be able to create strategies that succeed over time, as opposed to defaulting to our, I would say, evolutionary nature, which is to get as many calories as possible whenever they show up, because calorie deficiency was the biggest issue throughout all of mankind till relatively recently.
It's built into us.
So, okay. So how does someone develop that capacity to learn downstream? What would you say were the things that allowed you to clarify and say, oh, geez, if I continue doing this, this is going to be a problem. Therefore, you've got to build up the emotional capital or the intellectual capital, depending on where your drivers are, to make the uncomfortable choices or early, especially early on when there's no momentum.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit tapped. Like, I don't think I'm like most people. So, number one, I think from a very early age, I picked up pattern recognition and decided what I did and didn't want. And I looked for people that had both of those things. I looked at people that had what I wanted, and I would take note of their actions and their patterns. And I would look at people that had things that I did not want, and I would look at what they were doing. And then I would gravitate in the direction I wanted to go. So, for the people that had the things I didn't want or didn't want to live, I wouldn't do the things they did. For the people that had what I wanted, I paid very close attention. It's like, well, they're doing this every day. There's got to be a reason for it. I'm going to do that. And I think shortly after that, I started getting feedback, right? We get positive and negative feedback. And when we get positive feedback, we're more apt to do that thing more. And it was just the loop of that.
So walk me through what maybe your day looks like and how you set yourself up for success from a training and dietary exercise, both on a day, weekly, quarterly, annually basis. Like, how do you break down your goals, your objectives, and adhere to a lifestyle that leads to success?
Yeah, so there's a few non-negotiables, right, for everything. I've found the most simple things, again, we're going back to simplicity, the most simple things that have always created success for me and always will, and those have become my non-negotiables. On a week-to-week basis, I need to go to the gym 3 to 4 days a week. If I'm sick, if something's going on, I'm okay to miss a week because I've done it for the past 52, 104, whatever it is, weeks. That's fine. The same thing for nutrition. I need to make sure that every time I eat, there's some protein on my plate, and I generally try to eat it first, followed by my fibers. For sleep, I have these rituals of try to put the screen down, try to read a book, try to downregulate, try to get to bed at the same time and wake up roughly around the same time, sometimes a little bit lazy. And then we do the same thing for business, right? So the thing that produces the results, I try to do more of. I like to do some quarterly planning and figure out what my objective is and reverse engineer that. That's a good thing. A lot of it comes down to reverse engineering, right? What's my end goal and what are the steps that are going to get me there?
And how do you measure whether you're on track or off track?
Just try to look at logical data as opposed to emotional stuff. You know, I don't feel very good today. That doesn't mean, right? What did my measurements say? What do the weights in the gym say? Am I progressing? Am I falling back? What does my sleep say? What do my finances say? And just really track that data and remove the emotion from it.
And who are the mentors that you found that were influential in directing you in the right direction? And what mentors that you had said, oh, gee, I wish I didn't follow that person?
Well, for that one, I'm not going to name names. But in the early stages, it was just people in my town. I've always kind of hung out with people 5, 10 years older than me and set my bar to where they are, which is usually pretty good, but also sometimes kind of bad because I play the comparison game. And generally, I'm not going to be where the people are 10 years ahead of me. But God, it makes me push. And then once I kind of outgrew that and was ready for another level, I started looking online. I know you and I talked about Dan Martell earlier. He's definitely an online mentor, just somebody I pay attention to. I pay a coach for the past 2 years and probably for the rest of my life, unless I get the opportunity to pass him. But his name is Jason Phillips, super good business mentor, arguably an even better personal development and human mentor. And I think those are my biggest.
You said something that was really revealing is by hanging out with those people, you're essentially getting leverage on yourself. So if I was to circle back to the equation, that's kind of the standard is your future centered, your future focused, present day centered with a reverse engineering model. So if I follow the principles that this guy or this girl implemented, I think I can get there. And I'm setting someone out that's where I want to be within that time frame. so that I get the emotional or psychological leverage to make me do the hard things now that are uncomfortable.
That's exactly it.
Mm-hmm.
Good job pulling that apart. I like that.
Let's talk a little bit, switching gears a bit. Weights, cardio, supplementations, dietary strategies. How are you able to achieve the goal, your objectives? Because is there elements that you think are unique to you, and then maybe universal elements that are applied to anybody?
I really don't think there's much that's unique to me. I think I'm a very unspecial average person. I think I think anybody can accomplish what I've done in any space or much better, to be honest with you. Um, Dietary strategies are going to come first. And when I say that, I don't want anybody to confuse that for specific diets. Again, go back to the beginning of the episode. That's not what we're about. After that, strength training is going to be big, but that doesn't mean to deprive cardio, because that's going to improve our cardiovascular health, and you need that. After that, I would definitely add in supplements. But if we want to look at what a supplement is and look at the definition of that, it is one thing that enhances the effects of something else. And so if nothing else is in place, that supplement is enhancing nothing. So we need to have the foundational stuff in place to enhance it.
What are some of the things that you found that's enhanced your lifestyle? Food, diet, books, patterns. What do you think are the key elements that helps keep on track?
People, books. God, people and books are probably the biggest ones. After that, lifestyle. People, books, and lifestyle, I would say, are the biggest contributing factors. If you lead the right lifestyle, surrounded by the right people, and read the right books, and right is subjective to you, God, I think you can be the happiest, most successful, and again, successful subjective to you person in the world.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. What are some of the books that have influenced your thinking or your approach?
Grit by Angela Duckworth. Again, going back to the whole don't give up, do the uncomfortable stuff. That's a massive one. Principles by Ray Dalio is amazing. I'm probably 2/3 of the way through that, and I'm pretty much picking up a brick from Ray and laying it down behind me for my clients to follow, because some of the stuff he applies is just so incredible. And it's all mindset and mentality stuff.
Any other books come to mind?
I'm drawing blanks. Let me turn around. There we go. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Oxygen Advantage was a pretty good one, but that was just for like CrossFit training, not really quality of life.
Well, you got, I noticed your shirt says CrossFit Mess. You want to unpack that one a little bit?
Yeah, I bought it off an online thrift store for $3 when I got into CrossFit, and that's what I threw on today. I actually don't do CrossFit at all anymore because I demolished my body, and I'm more of in like a powerlifting bodybuilding phase right now.
Talk to me about that. What was your experience in CrossFit, and why have you switched out of that?
Yeah, I mean, number one, I loved it. It was just really good for my mental health, because it helped me look really good. It really jacked my heart rate up. And when it was high, I couldn't think about anything except for what was right in front of me, which was really good for me. In the same time, I think I trained too hard for too long, and I definitely paid a price. I've got some aches and pains that weren't around before CrossFit, so I'm gonna point the finger there. But every once in a while, I'll still go back and do a WOD or go to a box nearby. That's it. I really just started, again, going back to the thing that's driven me in any angle. I started CrossFit because the top competitor had the physique that I wanted. So I did the thing that he did.
Yeah, CrossFit's a very interesting, it emerged, I think, is it Kelly Starling or whatever out of San Francisco? Was it one of the founders?
Greg Glassman created it.
Right. So it became pretty popular in that area and then kind of really spread. And one of the things that I know, see, I grew up in the culture that we didn't have headsets, and we had to socialize at the gym, and we had to fight over what kind of music was going to play on the era. And then I saw like the gym culture provided just an amazing social interaction that was extremely supportive. You could walk in at any time. People would help each other spot. You knew all the people in the gym. You talked to them regularly. You shared the latest news, gossip, jokes, who was competing. People would come out to support them. There was a real social dynamic. And then a guy by the name of Steve Jobs invented the iPod. And slowly gym culture eroded into, I got my headset on, I'm locked in my world. I don't talk to anybody. I don't see anybody. It's very different. Like it's completely different. Now, what's interesting, as an older guy, I'll walk into the gym and I'll see some other older guys and we'll interact.
Yeah.
And I'm just as guilty. I'm a one ear pod guy in my ear. So I can stay present to both. But the older crowd will socialize a little bit more around the gym than I see with the younger crowds, which is really fascinating. But going back to the CrossFit, what I saw emerge in the CrossFit world is, again, because of the level of intensity, and I think one of the good elements of CrossFit is they captured that intensity that is missing in just an internalized thing, externalized, pushing a competitive nature, the camaraderie of competition and supporting your peers as they support you and, overcoming your previous limits, the standpoints. There's a leaderboard. There's something to aspire to. I can move up the board. I can compete against you're getting all these things that leverage the competitive spirit in the combative spirit. The downside of that is if you're starting out in a CrossFit class and you have 30 people doing the same class, the variance between individual capacity, exercise technique, functionality, and fitness is extreme. And like you got everybody trying at kind of one size fits all, and that's not the case. And I think the original CrossFit wasn't designed like that. It was actually individualized, but as it became corporatized, and then, the coach is coming out and then people got to make the rent and, they got trying to get these groups and using groupthink. Then that's when you start to see the injury ratio start to go up. And it's so many people that I know love CrossFit. It was one of the best things about their fitness career and was instrumental in getting them. But then they come back and say, yeah, but I can't do it anymore because it's just beating the crap out of my body. And I can't, I'm 50 years old and some of these ballistic things are just not working for me anymore.
Yeah. A big problem I saw too is like, from affiliate to affiliate or gym to gym, there's no solid process, right? And so anybody can get their L1, open a gym, and start writing workouts. And that's terrifying because people can easily overprogram and undercoach. And so if you're having people do way too much volume and not teaching them how to do a snatch or a power clean or anything appropriately, not only are you setting them up for failure, but you're setting them up for injury. And thankfully, that was not my experience most of the time. I went to some really good gyms, but sometimes it was. And that sucks because it ruins a lot of people and it ruins a lot of people's experience.
Yeah. I'm wondering what the next trend is going to be on the gym scene. I love watching these. What's that?
I think it'll be high rocks.
Tell me more.
I don't know much about it. It's basically an obstacle course race. I believe it's 3 small events, a 1,000 meter run followed by 3 small events. I'm sure I just butchered that. Somebody will tell me in the comments I'm wrong. That's good. But it's something along the lines of that. And I see it coming up really fast. It's just another way of like hybrid training, really.
Do you think that's happening because of the influence of YouTube? Like I see people going through these obstacle courses or little kids doing these like remarkable things. You're like, oh my God, look at that kid. He's flips and hanging off things and jumping over stuff and running. Like I'm amazed. And I'm always fascinated too, because I walked at Gold's Gym here in Venice. And
nice.
It was my dream as a kid to train at Gold's Gym, Venice Beach, California. And I managed to achieve it. And I walk past a CrossFit in the morning and I have to dodge some of the people running out of the CrossFit gym. And it's fascinating because both at Gold's and both at this CrossFit gym, which is literally 200 feet from Gold's, the level of conditioning of the general person in there is truly extraordinary. Like it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary at Gold's Gym. And I get inspired by the standard of the gym that I'm in.
Absolutely. It's funny you say that. I have a friend that I never understood because I'm more like you, whereas I like to be surrounded by people that are better than me. And this guy, my buddy, likes to go to gyms where he's in the best shape. I'm like, really? That's what lights you up? Man, it's just so interesting.
And the question is, maybe that's the way his brain is wired, and that's what he has to do in order to achieve it. It's not wrong, but I find it curious. I also feel that it's limiting. I remember my bodybuilding coach years ago, Scott Abel, probably one of the best minds ever in the bodybuilding world. He was very indifferent to people's competitive success.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, whether you came last or first in a contest, he didn't really think. He says, look, you could be the last in a contest where there were 3 people who were world-class athletes that you were competing against. You look great, and he goes, and then you could be first in a bunch of, also rans, didn't get much out of your physique, and now you think that you're a winner. You just beat the people in the eyes of a subjective group of people on that given day. It means absolutely nothing relative to your progress in the manifestation of your potential.
That's great.
He was tough. He was old school tough. Like, I coached with him for about 5 years in total, and I acquired 3 compliments from him in those 5 years.
What were they?
Yeah, so he was tough. Yeah.
That's wild. Do you remember what they were? Was it anything like substantial, or was it just like?
Oh yeah, I have a picture here I have a picture of me on the first one, 1998. I was standing on stage at the national championships in the light heavyweight division. And that was the first I'd been training with him for a year. And I remember I got the shot actually where he's saying it. He's up in the audience in Toronto. And I remember he's like, "You look like a god." And I was like, "Oh my God, that was the greatest compliment ever." Right. That's it. That's all I wanted. And
amazing.
And then my next compliment came literally 5 years later when I went to the Mr. Universe and as a vegetarian, not on drugs. And I think I placed 13th in that show. And I was like, I wasn't really competitive at the show. Like, and he's like, "Wait, what you've done here is truly extraordinary. It's one of the most extraordinary things. Like I was competing against the guy." He said, "I was coaching another guy that used $70,000 worth of drugs to show up at that show. You're in the same competition as that guy. This is disproportionately unfair." And I know the difference on that, and that the fact that you did it, that's pretty incredible. And I knew going into that contest that my likelihood of success was not high. But I was going to it for different reasons than maybe people were going to do. If I had chosen to cheat, beat the test or whatever, I could have been competitive in that contest. But it wasn't leading to the long-term downstream. And then it turned out that worked out really good because Matt, after that contest, my business partner said, "Hey, vegetarian bodybuilders out not on drugs at the Mr. Universe contest, we could sell this as a course online." And why am I telling the listeners that started Bioptimizers 20 years ago? I'm telling people that because playing the long game is the best game in town to play.
Mm-hmm.
It really, really is. And you don't often have that perspective when you're younger. You want that level of success or accolades or claims or, the dopamine hit or the sense of status. And it's kind of like I call gangster lifestyle, right? The gangster lifestyle looks really attractive on Instagram. You got lots of girls, you're driving a flashy car, you're wearing flashy clothes, and you're hanging out in cool places. That lifestyle is not a long-term lifestyle. It's short, fast, and then very detrimental to any long-term project. And what a lot of people don't understand is a lot of times people, there was a great interview with Mike Tyson on Michael Francis. It was this hot boxing with him. Michael Francis was a gangster in New York that kind of turned good eventually. And they were talking about, and he says, "Well, how was it like on the street?" And they were kind of talking about New York back in the days when the mob was running wild and all that stuff. And Mike Tyson said, "Yeah," he says, "I was in a state where I didn't think was going to have anything and I wasn't going to live very long. So I said, I want that car. I want that thing. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll kill somebody. I'll steal someone. I'll rob it because I'm not going to be here long. At least I've got that for a little bit of time. It's a hyper short-term thinking model that rationalizes in that short term, but it's also a lot of the people in that world have accepted that the long-term process is not option because they see that as hopeless.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. And it's funny you say that because, God, when I was super young, like a young kid, that's the lifestyle I wanted.
Right.
I was like, I just want all the now.
Right. Let's talk about another topic, maybe, because I'm polling people on this and getting the whole feedback.
Mm-hmm.
What's your whole think of like the new GLP-1 antagonists, all the diet drugs that are being used? I mean, it's probably the biggest. I mean, it's the amount of money that's being made in the pharmaceutical industry is astronomical. What's your whole take on that? I'd like to get your opinion.
Yeah, I think it's just Pandora's box, right? I mean, we've opened it. People have learned what it can do without understanding the circumstances of it or the long-term effects. And so again, I mean, God, talk about the gangster lifestyle. They want the gangster lifestyle for weight loss. They just want it now, and they're not looking ahead to what it's going to cost them later on. So God, that was a perfect analogy. But you can't stop it. It's not going anywhere. So it's funny. I'm running a challenge right now for a bunch of clients, and on our call on Sunday, somebody piped up and she's like, "Hey, I have a question. I'm a little bit embarrassed." I was like, there is no embarrassment. Like, you ask, you get vulnerable. Let's go. She's like, "Okay, well, I want to do well on this program, but I'm on a GLP, and I really just think a lot of people are going to think it's bad." It's like, "Hey, you're on it, and I know other people that are on it, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'm not going to tell you to stop. I'm going to teach you the right way to do it, the best way to do it, and keep you as successful as possible. So we're going to make sure now more than ever that protein and keeping that muscle is at the top of your priority list. Because if it's not, you're going to have none, and you're just accelerating that detrimental diet process that we explained earlier in this episode."
Yeah, this is a really important piece. I think a lot of people in that whole camp need to understand is it goes right back to lifestyle again. You can take the magic pill for a while and it's going to work. But if you haven't adapted your lifestyle for the new you or, your future self, you're going to collapse again. And it's probably going to be, the collapse is going to be worse than if you hadn't done it before. So the stakes are essentially being amplified by drugs amplify the stakes, whether you're taking, pharmaceutical medications prescribed to you by your doctor, you're taking painkillers, whether you're taking recreational drugs, whether you're taking diet drugs, street drugs. Drugs are like cash for your body. They amplify the exhaustion of your metabolic bank account.
Mm-hmm.
And so used judiciously, that can make you get to a certain place quicker, but the cost, it might be like a shark loan. Yeah, I got to buy the car, but I took a loan from, the kind of like the Limitless guy. I took it from the Russian guy. He's like, okay,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, okay, now I got bigger problems. I've got this major IQ and I've got all this money now, but now I've got this gangster that's going to hunt me down to kill me because I've mortgaged my future for present day gains.
Yeah, I think you're the king of analogies.
Thanks. So let's go back to, you made a switch in gears. So what's Joe doing? Who's it for? And how are you facilitating that for the world in general?
God, I mean, if somebody's listened to this podcast and they've resonated with the whole diet thing, if you've done 2 diets, 3 diets, 5 diets or more, and you're not where you want to be, I'm for you. Because the diets clearly weren't. And I think that's the most clear way to put it. If anybody's dieted multiple times and they're still not where they want to be, they're missing the point, is ultimately what it is. It's not the next thing that's going to shift your life. It's your lifestyle and the actions you take that are going to do it. And I just want to help people see that and show them how simple it can be. Because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you or me work super hard at maintaining what we have.
No, it's built into the lifestyle. To the external person that's not experienced it, they might say, oh my God, that looks too difficult. I could never do that. But when you just habitualized the things that work, it's actually not that hard once you get there. As you get older, I will say this, as you do get older, there are significant metabolic shifts that do happen. And so what I would say, your range of variability starts to lower. In other words, I could get away with more when I was younger. You know, whether that was going off my diet for, you know, weekend or whatever, something like that, the extraneous stuff, things like that. You just don't have the hormonal wherewithal. I mean, I could easily go on some TRT, maybe take a few little things and, you know, be razor sharp within 6 weeks all the time. Now I just have to play that long-term game. Like I did an experiment a couple of years ago that had unintended consequences. I did my bodybuilding shows, and then immediately following the Olympia, I decided that I was going to go run a marathon. Never ran before, never did other stuff. So I said, okay, because bodybuilders don't run marathons. I thought, whoa, it'd be cool to compete at a world championship and compete a marathon in 6 months. I think I could do it. So this is the unintended consequences of entering a field that you don't have expertise in. So I started running. I ran my first half marathon about 2 months later and got prepared for the marathon and continued on that process and competed, did my marathon and, just before my 50th birthday, I did all that in my 50th year. And it was like exciting because I finished the marathon, which was really, really hard, really, really tough. Now, here's the part that might find people shocking. I was training much more for the marathon than I was for the bodybuilding contest. And from the time I stepped off stage in bodybuilding to the time that I competed as a marathoner, I gained 13 pounds of body fat during that time.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. None of that surprises me.
Right. But it might surprise our listeners because I had developed the habits of regulating my diet and lifestyle using weight training. I did not have those same habits. So the delayed hunger onset from a ton of cardio that it takes to go from not running to marathon speed, didn't understand that at all. So I did it as an experiment, and I didn't try to re-regulate. I didn't try to recalibrate during that time. I just said, what's going to be the results of that? And then I would say it took me about a year to recover from the marathon metabolic.
Yep.
And so for those of listeners out there that are out there struggling and trying to do the cardio calorie model, that's where you're going to head. And this is why you'll need a person like Joe in your life to help mitigating maybe some of these well-meaning strategies that are going to take you off track because maybe you don't have the foresight or the insight to determine what's right for you. Joe, where do people reach you? How do they find out more about what you're doing, who you're helping, and how they can get involved with you?
Yeah, number one, I'm very searchable. You can just search Joe Hoye, or at this point, it's going to be Diet Detox, not Hoye Fit, but Diet Detox anywhere and we'll pop up. One thing I want to do, Wade, is if anybody resonated with this episode, with me, with what we're after, I want to give a listener 3 months of free coaching.
Wow.
No strings attached. When you get in, there's nothing we're going to sell you aside from the fact that you never needed a diet and you're never going to do one again in your life. So if anybody wants, I'll send you a form. We'll put it in the show notes and they can apply. That form is going to look like a name, a phone number, and email. So I contact the winner. And the last one is why. Why should you win the 3 months of free coaching? And you really got to sell me because that's how we pick.
I love it. That's fantastic. So there you are, folks. That's Joe Hoye. Never diet again. And there's a free coaching option. Please go to the show notes and the links to grab that and make your best pitch to Joe. I'm sure he's excited to hear from you and to find out more about you. And more importantly, I want to encourage all of our listeners to go find yourself a coach. The world today is confusing. There's an overload of information. There's an overload of good information, but there's an overload of bad information. And the ability to discern that and stay on track and have that reinforcement of a coaching relationship I think is very powerful and very potent for the long term so that you don't get sidetracked, you don't get distracted, and you do achieve your goals without destroying your future. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate having you on the show. And for all of us, this is another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. I'm Wade T. Lightheart at Bioptimizers. Happy for you to join us on Election Day in America. Imagine that. Of course, the election will be decided, and hopefully the world hasn't burnt down to a crisp as some people believe that's going to happen. God bless you all and take care. Have a great day.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: how to get away with eating sugar. Hey, look, sugar is normally one of the worst things for you. But let's be honest. I mean, we all cheat from time to time. And here's a little trick that will ensure your body benefits from the sugar. Now, before you eat or drink anything sweet, take 5 to 8 capsules of P3OM. The patented strain in the formula devours sugar so fast it literally doubles in the body every 20 minutes in the presence of sugar. That doesn't mean that you can or you should eat a bunch of sugar or sit around all day doing that. But on the days that you do cheat, or you go after one of those maybe meals that you wouldn't normally do, this ensures that you get something in your gut that eats the sugar. And it's not going to feed the bad guys or spike your blood glucose nearly as much. So to learn more about P3OM and its sugar-devouring and protein-digesting properties and how it can transform your gut and metabolism, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.